Let's all please give an enthusiastic Coca-Cola welcome to an actress, an athlete, a speaker, a Coca-Cola scholar, and a truly amazing young woman, Kelsey Tanch.
As we start off this afternoon, I have to be honest with you all. I have a confession to make. I do not really care for fish. The thought of being stuck in a tank, well, it kind of scares me. Wouldn't that scare all of you? You know, I faced a lot of challenges in my life. You see, as I came up here, you probably noticed that I walk a little different, and that's because when I was just 15 years old, I had a stroke. Now, I'm sure that you all, as professionals, already know what it means to have a stroke, but can you imagine having one at just 15 years old? I faced a lot of challenges in my life, as I said, but I was very fortunate that I grew up in a big family. You see, I'm actually a triplet, and I have an older brother and sister who are twins. And this was always great. I always had a lot of support growing up. In fact, everybody's favorite joke as we were kids, was, "What's next, quadruplets?" We didn't find that funny in our family. Not at all. But I had a lot of support, and this was really helpful because what I haven't told you is that when I was just 5 years old, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and I almost died. I underwent surgery and radiation treatment, and then my life started to get back to normal. In the next 10 years, I excelled in athletics. By the time I was 13, I was ranked 3rd in the world and 2nd in the nation for girls wakeboarding. You all know what wakeboarding is, right? It's that thing that you do on a board behind a boat, kind of like this. In high school, I became a varsity lightweight cheerleader. I'm totally just kidding, can you imagine? Just wouldn't work, would it? I became a varsity lightweight rower. And it was around the time that my team won the state champion rowing competition for the state of Florida that I found out that my brain tumor had come back after being gone for 10 years. 10 years of birthdays. 10 years of being with my family and friends, knowing that my tumor was gone and I could celebrate every year the day that I had surgery. And while I thought that I would just go and have surgery again and that would be the end of it, this ended up not being the case. Sometime during or after surgery, I suffered from a complete right-sided stroke. I woke up to find the entire right side of my body completely paralyzed at just 15 years old. And it was at this point in life, and I think that is a point that we all face at different ages, that I had to make the most important decision in my entire life. And the decision that I had to make was I going to allow myself to sit in a hospital bed and in a wheelchair for the rest of my life, or was I going to fight back and relearn to use the right side of my body? And that is the decision that I chose. So while I started in a wheelchair and spent what seemed like forever in that wheelchair, slowly I moved to a walker and then to a cane, and now it's been 8 years and I can finally walk on my own. In order to get better from having a stroke and to live a great life and be independent, follow my passion and help people, I would need to learn to do 3 things. I would need to learn to see differently, try differently, and live my life differently, which is what I hope that you all can take away as well today. Let's face it, we all are different. Some people's differences show on the inside, and some, like mine, well, they show very clearly on the outside. And we all also face challenges, but we have the power and the ability to see our challenges differently. You know, one of my clearest memories is the day that I started back to school after I had a stroke. In fact, it was less than 3 months after I had a stroke, and I was still in a wheelchair. And you know what happened, guys? I went back to school, and I immediately lost all of my friends. You see, I was different, and they didn't know how to treat me. But as soon as I got out of that wheelchair, moved past that walker, and past that cane and could finally walk on my own, I realized that if I wear sweatshirts or jackets like this, and I stick my hand into my pocket, No one seemed to notice or care that I was different. And for the longest time, I kept my hand in my pocket, tried to hide my differences and my disability to fit in. But what I realized over time, and it took me a long time, is that we're all different. And there's no such thing as normal. And we should embrace our differences and our adversity because they're often the best things about us. And it was once I was literally able to take my hand out of my pocket that my life changed forever. That I realized that I just went from looking normal to being a little bit different. In fact, it was at the age of 17, less than 2 years after I had a stroke, that I wrote the following poem. This poem has actually gone on to be published and gives a very clear definition of how different I felt after I had a stroke at the age of 15. This poem is called The Aquarium. I do not really care for fish, she said, when asked if she wanted to visit the aquarium. Being paralyzed is like being a member of another species. She was just like those fish, stuck in a place where she did not belong. How scary it was to be trapped in an aquarium. Her fingers no longer moved, her hand could no longer write, her wrist could no longer go up and down. In fact, she no longer had a hand, and her arm was now a fin. Her paralyzed arm, just like a fin, the kind that has been hit by a boat. How scary it was to be trapped. Everything taken away from her, just like the fish in the aquarium. Her legs were like flippers, she only truly had one, and while she may have been able to swim, she could not walk, she could not run, just like the fish in the aquarium. Where do you want to go today? What do you want to do? But choosing to stay in one place was the only true freedom she knew. But it's the largest aquarium in the world. No, she did not want to go look at creatures in their unnatural environments as long as she was living in one of her own. At the age of 17, as well as when I was 15 and went back to school, I couldn't have felt more different. It took me 6 years to learn to take my hand out of my pocket, to love who I was, not feel like a fish anymore, and to realize that at the end of the day, we're all different. There's no such thing as normal, and we should embrace our differences and our adversity because they're often the best things about us. You see, the first step in my recovery would be to look past my losses and my challenges to my abilities, the abilities that I had that still remained. In fact, when I think about this, I think about my relationship with the Coca-Cola Company and how I don't think that I would have ever formed a relationship with the Coca-Cola Company if I hadn't had a brain tumor and a stroke. You see, my relationship with the Coca-Cola Company started long before I worked here last year, when I became a Coca-Cola Scholar and applied for the Coca-Cola Scholarship my senior year of high school at the age of 17. Little did I know that it would turn into an everlasting relationship and system of support. You see, the Coca-Cola Company and the Coca-Cola Scholarship, they're more than just a company and a scholarship program. They're a family and an everlasting system of support. In fact, I still remember the day that I received a letter in the mail saying I was a Coca-Cola Scholar. I strongly believe that the reason I was chosen as a Coca-Cola Scholar is because of this company's ability to focus on ability versus disability. Because as I came to realize as I formed a relationship with this company, this is a company that focuses on growth versus decay, and therefore also values and focuses on ability versus disability. In times of insecurity and anxiety, be assured that your company has a culture who will focus on your growth and empowerment, just as they did mine. In life, we all face challenges, but we have the power and the ability to see them differently. See differently, try differently, and live your lives differently. In life, I believe that we have the ability to try differently too. By using the word no as a challenge, being more curious, and learning to collaborate. You know, it's fascinating to me how much we hear the word no in life. In fact, I've heard it quite a bit lately. And I have to be honest, I have learned that the word no doesn't usually actually mean no, but instead it means that we've asked the wrong question or the wrong person. For example, I travel quite a bit. I'm at the airport almost every week, and I always go through the handicap line. And I was there the other day and handed my boarding pass to the TSA representative, and he gave me a strong look, a very strange one too, up and down, and said, "You can't go through this line. You're not handicapped. You're not in a wheelchair. You see that sign right over there? You have to be in a wheelchair to be handicapped." He was pointing at the handicap sign. After trying to convince him for several minutes that you didn't have to be in a wheelchair to be handicapped, seriously, right? I finally snatched my boarding pass and made a run for it. Well, maybe not exactly a run, but kind of. My version of that instead. I guess he just didn't realize that I was disabled because he couldn't clearly see it on the outside. Now, I'm not advocating messing with TSA representatives. Well, maybe a little. No, I'm just kidding, not at all. But what I am saying is that sometimes in life I've learned that the word no doesn't actually mean no. Instead, it means that we need to ask another question or even another person. Or maybe that we should just make a run for it. In life, in order to try differently, I believe that we also need to be more curious and collaborate. In a 2012 blog post entitled "The 12 Most Striking Tendencies of Creative People," author Kim Phillips shares with us some really interesting tendencies of people who are creative. And I want to share a few of them with you, and then I want to talk about one in particular. And what she says is that creative people make a lot of mistakes, don't like rules, are willing to ask what if, motivate themselves, and collaborate. And when I think about this and I think about creativity and collaboration, one person in particular comes to mind, and that is Steve Jobs. You all may remember Steve Jobs and what happened with him and the company Apple. You see, as a young man, he studied at Reed College, where he found himself spending all of his adopted parents' money. So he decided to drop out after just 6 months. But he still wanted to be on campus and he still wanted to go to classes. But because he was no longer a student, he would actually sleep on friends' dorm room floors, and he even returned Coca-Cola bottles for the 5 cents that they were worth. Now that he was no longer taking his normal classes that were required for his major, he could sit in on whatever classes he wanted to. And one day he came across a calligraphy class. And in this class he learned about different fonts and typographies. The things he learned in this class are the reason that the Mac computer has many of its wonderful features today. By the age of 20, him and his friend Wozniak started the company Apple in Steve's parents' garage. Within 10 years, Apple had over 4,000 employees and was a $2 billion company. But when the company hired John Sculley to help run the company, Steve Jobs and John Sculley, they got into a disagreement. And when it was taken to the board of directors sided with John Sculley. And at the age of 30 years old, Steve Jobs was fired from the company he started. In a 2005 commencement speech that Steve Jobs gave at Stanford University, he said, "Getting fired from Apple was the best thing that ever happened to him." Within the next 5 years, he went on to start 2 more companies, Next and Pixar. You all may know Pixar for some of its amazing movies, including Toy Story, The Incredibles, Monsters, Inc., and my personal favorite, Finding Nemo, although I do not really care for fish. Soon, Apple bought the company Next, and Steve Jobs returned to Apple. Collaboration was key to the success of Steve Jobs and the companies he started. He had artists and designers work with computer scientists, computer analysts, and computer scientists to create the best, most innovative, creative products. The success of Steve Jobs would not have occurred without creativity and collaboration. In life, in order to try differently, we need to use no as a challenge and realize that the word no often does not mean no. We need to reach inside ourselves and pull out that creativity that we often lose from childhood to adulthood. And most of all, we need to learn to be more collaborative. You see, there's nothing in this world that we do alone. And when we work together, everything turns out better. See differently, try differently, and live your lives differently. In life, I also believe it's very important to try to live differently. By taking the hard situations that we all go through hard situations on a daily basis, taking these hard situations, looking past them, and turning them into something great. When we have the power and ability to do this, our hardest obstacles in life can actually have the most rewarding opportunities. By the age of 16 years old, I knew that I wanted to be a professional motivational speaker. And I knew that I wanted to start my own business. But this would be a big risk. It took guts. In a market where 33% of all small businesses fail within the first 2 years, according to the Small Business Administration, SBA, and making it in the professional speaking industry to take 2 to 4 years if you're good enough, there were no guarantees. Not to mention the fact that I would need to find a way to support myself along the way, had 2 parents who were doctors, and 4 siblings going to medical school. After I had a stroke at the age of 15, I started to ask myself some really silly questions, like, was I good enough? And would I ever make it? And what I realized over time is that I was good enough, and I could make it. And I didn't have to be a doctor or a lawyer or sit behind a desk, and I could follow my passion. When I think about this, I think about the fact that oftentimes in life, we try to be like everyone else, which is something I think we form as children, and it goes all the way through adulthood. In fact, it was one thing to overcome 2 brain tumors and a stroke. It would be a whole new challenge to start my own business. But I knew 2 things. 1, that life was about being happy, and 2, that life was about helping others. And in order to do this, I would need to take a leap of faith. When I think about this, I think about the word fear. And what the word fear really means. I'm sure many of you have heard this before, but the word fear really is just false evidence appearing real. And when I really started to think about this, I realized how silly fear really is. Yes, what I was doing was scary, and yes, it was different. In fact, there were many people who told me I could never be a motivational speaker. But when we believe in ourselves, and we believe in the value of what we're trying to accomplish, we can't let the fear of failure stand in our way. You know, Earl Nightingale reminds us that the things we think about are the things we become. Successful, connected people think about good things. They don't focus on what's not working. Successful people follow their dreams and goals and don't let the fear of failure stand in their way. So, at the age of 22, after I had been told I would never walk again, never graduate high school, never go to college, never get a job, let alone work at a Fortune 500 company, and had done all those things, I decided to start my own business. I decided to live differently and not let fear stand in my way. It's interesting, though, because when I was a kid, I didn't want to be a motivational speaker. In fact, I had an even crazier dream. I wanted to be an actress. I wanted to be on movie and television screens everywhere, and for everyone to know who I was. And for a while, I actually did do this. I spent time out in Los Angeles, California, where I did movie and television work and was on a few different shows and movies. Rumor Has It with Jennifer Aniston and Mark Ruffalo, Gilmore Girls, Desperate Housewives, and Entertainment Tonight actually did a feature story on me as well. I was a little bit of a star. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. And I was out in Los Angeles, California with my father, and we went to a Chinese restaurant. So you guys are going to think I'm a little crazy, but to this day, I've never opened another fortune cookie in my entire life. It's been a lot of years since then, too. And I have it in my apartment, and it's framed, and I look at it almost every day. And what it says is, "A wish will be granted after a long delay." On the bottom of every fortune cookie fortune, as you all may know, are a set of numbers. And the last number on this fortune cookie fortune, I promise you, is 23. And just this past year, I turned 23 years old. Soon after receiving this fortune cookie and this fortune, I went back to Orlando, Florida, where I was from. I became a world champion athlete, and then my brain tumor came back, and I had a stroke, and I woke up paralyzed, and things didn't seem to be going as well as they should be. What I realize now, though, and what I didn't realize then, is that the wishes I wanted weren't the wishes that I got. But the wishes I got were so much better. The wishes I wanted at the time, obviously, were to be famous and to be a world champion wakeboarder, but also to be an actress and to be out in Los Angeles, California. Those weren't the wishes that I got. But the wishes that I got, where I get to travel and speak to people all over and make a difference and even be with all of you here today, and have been able to turn my passion into my career, those wishes, the ones I ended up with, were so much better. As you leave this room today and you go back to your work and your families and your leisure time, I encourage you to do the same. Keep wishing, keep hoping, never give that up. But also realize that sometimes those things change. And the wishes that you want right here in this moment today may or may not be the wishes you end up with. But where you end up going in life and what you end up doing next and how you end up changing the world, those wishes, the ones you end up with, will be the best wishes possible. No matter how hard life gets, you have the power and the ability to see differently. Try differently, and live your lives differently. Even when you don't think you can, or other people tell you that you can't, just try. Sometimes life is going to be difficult. Sometimes life is going to be hard. But you have the power and the ability to take the hard, look past it, and turn it into something great. That's how you'll take your obstacles in life and turn them into opportunities. It took me 6 years not to feel like a fish in a tank anymore, to learn to love who I am and accept the fact that I was different, to take my hand out of my pocket and realize that we're all different and there's no such thing as normal, and we should embrace our differences because they're often the best thing about us. I do not really care for fish, and when I was able to learn to laugh at the fact that I was different, be more curious and collaborate, I no longer felt like a fish. As you leave this room today, I encourage you all to do the same. Find your passion, set new goals, and never, never settle. Take your hand out of your pocket, learn to be more creative, and collaborate. I challenge you to pursue something real that's different and scary, and then ask yourself what you are afraid of. And then I encourage you to let go of fear. See differently, try differently, and live your lives differently. Thank you.